Welcome to Roll Call, the #1 Birmingham Roller podcast, bringing together Birmingham roller fans from all over the world.
All right, everybody, we're live streaming. Real quick, for those of you that are tuning in right now, just give a thumbs up if you got good audio and a video signal. But welcome back, everybody.
All right, guys. Hey, welcome to Roll Call. So we get today's guest. Today's guest is Brian Krog. And for you guys that don't know Brian is from Canada. What part of Canada are you in, Brian?
British Columbia.
British Columbia.
Pacific side. Yeah.
Right. So Brian has been all around the world recently. So we're going to talk to Brian, I'm sure, about that a lot today. But to start off, Brian, tell us about yourself and your history with Pigeons. And we'd sort of like you to take us through your meeting and knowing Monty.
Okay.
And you know, and then from there we can lead into the World Cup, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
That would be great.
So I was a 13-year-old kid that found out about roller pigeons. A buddy of mine put up some pigeons, and I thought that was very cool. Most of them were street pigeons. But then he pulled out one and he said, "This is a very special one." And he said, "This one's called a Birmingham roller." And he went out and he tossed it up. And I saw this thing do little, mostly somersaults, but maybe a couple that were a few feet deep. And I thought, that's just incredible. I want to get into this. So I joined the Vancouver Pigeon and Poultry Club, and Monty Neibel was the president of that club at the time. And the long and short of it was, he looked at the birds that I had accumulated, buying them from here and there. And he said they were all garbage and I should get rid of them. And I needed to start with real rollers if I wanted to go anywhere or get ahead. And so he drove away, and my dad came out to my loft and said, "Where are all your birds?" And I said, "Oh, that fellow took them. He said they're not really good." And my dad kind of laughed. He said, "You paid money for those birds." And I said, "Well, this guy's very famous and he's promised to get me started." So as I was talking to my dad, Monty's car came back and he had a whole bunch of boxes, and he had 24 late bred birds, and he gave them to me, and he said, "Here's the deal." He said, "I'll give them to you for free. I want you to know that a lot of people would pay a lot of money for these birds. But," he said, "as long as you promise to join the club, compete in all the flies, and travel with us," he said, "these will be the birds you can get started with." And so he started me off that way. And he said, "Just let them breed themselves." He said, "When they mature, let them pick their own mates." He says, "These are going to be your stock birds for a while." And he said, "I'll help you train and learn how to fly the young birds." And that was the start of it. So right away, my first time was in 1969. I entered international roller competition between Washington State guys and Monty and the Vancouver club guys. And I was competitive right off the bat. In my backyard were famous old roller flyers. Like, in addition to Monty, there was Lloyd Thompson, uh, Bill Anderson, a few local guys. And from the American side in my backyard, there were Hans Rotenbacher and Joe Houghton, Bruce Cooper, and the birds put on quite a show. And from that point forward, I was hooked. And so that was my heart. That was my start in a hobby. And so that was 1969, my first international fly. And up until after the year 2000, I flew in every competition except for 5 years of university when I was getting a teaching degree. But as soon as I built my first house, I built my first loft and phoned Monty up and said, I want to get back into the hobby. And he was thrilled to have me back. So that was how I started.
Wow. Wow. That's
It was a good
story.
start.
That's a great story, Brian. You
Yeah.
know, Monty, you knew Monty for quite a few years before I met him. I think I met Monty in the 90s. So
Yeah.
you had known Monty good
I
30
was
years.
13 years. Yeah, I was
Yeah.
13 years old in 1969.
Wow.
And that was my first competitive fly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, and you knew Monty through all those years, even when you didn't have the rollers, you still knew him
Oh
pretty
yeah,
well, right?
I kept dropping by and watching his birds fly every chance I had. He was also my hunting buddy and my fishing buddy.
Mm-hmm.
We played a lot of pool together. Um, he just became my best friend in the world. So we did a lot of things together.
Wow, that's fantastic. That's a fantastic story. I mean, all of us know Monty, some don't know him personally.
Yeah,
Uh, and in mentioning his name, it makes me think about him. We ribbed him a lot. We
yeah.
gave him a lot of ribbing. He gave it back.
He was an unforgettable guy. You got it.
Yeah, he was unforgettable. And every time I saw him, I left with a good story.
Yeah,
Every time.
yeah, for sure.
And I enjoyed his company. I really
Yeah.
did. So, here's to Monty. I miss him.
Well, after Bruce Cooper saw my birds fly for the first time, he said he had never seen a young guy fly his first kit that looked that good. And he said, but next time I'm going to bring a hard hat. I had revved them up a little too much, and there was a few of them coming down. But we got a big joke out of that too.
Now, Brian, how did it come about you doing the World Cup? Judging the World Cup fly.
After Monty died in the year 2000, I started getting a lot of requests if I would like to come judge, because everybody knew that I knew him better than anyone else. And with Monty gone, they asked if I'd like to do judging, and I said I would. And I started judging the year after Monty died. And that was kind of the start of it. So mostly it was in the Northwest United States and Canada. And I just pretty much every year were requested by somebody somewhere if I'd like to come down and judge. I enjoyed it a lot, and I stuck with it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Good. And so when you started judging, was there the 1, 2, 3 rules and quality and depth factors?
Yeah. It was in the year 2000, the World Cup rules had pretty much settled on what they are today.
Mm-hmm.
So the NBRC rules were a little bit different, but not much. Mm-hmm. So basically, we had shifted from way back when I started, where we used to call half turns, quarter turns, 3/4 turns, full turns. We had shifted to the modern way of judging, where it was more about individual quality, not just action. Because way back in the old days, a half turn was pretty much action. Mm. But with the World Cup, with the qualifying scores and the multipliers, from the year 2000 on, well, even through the 80s and 90s, most of the judging rules were the same. They didn't change much.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I would be correct in saying that you saw a lot of Monty's good kids, great kids.
Oh, I saw them more than anybody because growing up, he only lived 5 miles from my place.
Mm-hmm.
And so even before I could drive a car, I was driving my bike over there all the time. So I saw them fly more than anyone except Monty Neibel. So yeah, I did get to see great kits a lot.
Yeah.
Nice.
So I mean, this was kind of inevitable, and this is in foresight that you would end up judging the World Cup at some point.
Yeah. Well, when the previous winner, which was always the guy given the opportunity, not a lot of guys these days, of course, anywhere can get away from their family, their job, all kinds of other things, and they just asked anybody who might want to judge to put their name in and give references to where they had judged, and named a bunch of people in a bunch of places. And a number of those places had asked me to come back and judge more than once.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that was my one chance. I thought I was able to have the opportunity, being that I'm retired, and I thought I can get the time, and I would love to do it, and I jumped at the opportunity.
How far? I mean, like, I know that you've had health issues with having the pigeons, and you're out of pigeons. Um, how how long have you been out of pigeons? And prior to the judging of the World Cup, was your last competitive judge? And if you know, did you still have
Well,
it in you?
I flew competitively up till the year Monty died, and I flew a couple of years after that. But once Monty had died, the the activity in the British Columbia Club had dwindled down to just a few people, and I was one of the last. And that was the last year I had the birds was 2004, as far as competing with rollers.
Mm-hmm.
And I then moved to a new location where roller flying became impossible. And the predators were too bad, and I lived right on the side of a big mountain. And so I quit the rollers in 2004 and started playing around with making rare colored show homers, which I kept up till 2 years ago. And then the lung problem started. So after that, 2 years ago, I had to give up all my birds. And so I've really only judged rollers for the last 24 years actively.
So once you found out you had to get rid of your birds, the homers,
Yeah.
and I remember seeing a lot of pictures of those. They were beautiful,
Yeah.
really
Thanks.
beautiful colors. Did you have any hesitancy in doing the judging? I mean, did you feel comfortable?
Oh, no. Right from the year 2000, after Monty died, I absolutely loved going around judging because I had confidence and experience for what I should be looking for. And I really enjoyed it. And I was meeting a lot of people that I had known forever.
Mm-hmm.
Anytime anyone famous came over to Monty's to see his birds fly, I always got an invite to be there. So I got to meet famous flyers from around the world, because inevitably it was Monty Neibel that was going to finish first place in British Columbia. And so he was always involved in the World Cup, right from the year it was started all the way on. So I met a lot of people around the world, and it was just something I loved doing.
Hmm. Hmm.
Have you, from all your travels and your judging, and especially now judging the World Cup, have you ran into somebody that has Monty's birds nowadays that has been successful with them or that's doing something with them?
The only one that I can think of on this last World Cup um, was a fella named Izzy in uh, Haydar in Sydney, Australia. He kind of gathered up the last of the what they called the Canadian birds, and all those Canadian birds were imports that they had received that I sent after Monty died, because I knew Monty had committed himself to sending a dozen of his birds to Australia. And so after he died and I had the birds, I decided I had to do the same thing and sell, or not sell, gave 12 birds to the Australians. And that's where the Canadians came from. Some that I had um, were from my own breeding. Some were from Monty's, and some of my family had also been raised by John Weens, because originally when John Weens started, who ended up winning the World Cup, he had birds from myself and from Monty, I believe, were his only source of birds.
Um, I was gonna say to if okay, let's just say like me, I'm building up what I want to consider my family of birds out of
Yeah,
all the birds that I've been putting together these past few years, and let's just say that you're wanting to come back into the hobby and you got your a few Monty Neibel's birds, and like me, I'm doing a polygamy breeding, right?
yeah.
What would you look for in that cock bird to start off your family, to start off breeding in several hens? What you as a person that has judged the whole world and seen some of the best birds in the world, what were you looking to for that bird?
Well, I think the way that every beginner should do it is the way Monty helped me start off. Rather than buying an individual from here or there, I think you're better off traveling, making friends. Um, and when you find a top level flyer whose birds you really admire, I think the better way to do it is to buy a round of young, buy an entire last round, 20, 30 birds, whatever you can manage to buy, rather than buying one or two adults. Because when you do it that way, as Monty said to me, he said, now you've got every genetic factor that I've got. You've got something out of every pair that I own.
Hmm.
And he said, so you truly start off with a family to begin with, because most people who gather a bird here and there from different families and try and turn them into their own, um, that's a really long haul and a tough thing to do. But if you can start off with a whole family of young around and use them as stock birds right away, if you get 20 birds or 30 birds from one good flyer, your chance of making progress is a lot higher than going around trying a couple of birds here, a couple of birds there from various families.
And
So I would advise everybody to travel a lot, go to all the flies you can, make as many friends as you can, and start off that way.
what
Buy
about
a
from
round of young
what
ones.
about from the point where you started those birds, you brought them in, you bred them out, you flew them, and you said, you know what, I gotta select the best cock right now to breed from. What are you gonna look for into that bird?
Well,
To
the way Monty advised me to do it is what I did. Um, he said he said let them let them breed any way they want. Let them mate themselves up just to get going. And then he said, keep track of good records of what the young birds can do. And he said, if you've got a pair that throws even one pigeon in a year that you like, leave that pair together. He said, they've already proven that they can produce something good. And he said, with the pairs that don't produce anything that you consider a keeper, he said, just keep using them, but give them a different mate every year. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was great advice, because he said, eventually, you'll usually find that you'll find pairs that click and they start producing a higher number of pairs. And that's generally what he did. Any bird that got into his stock loft would be tried with multiple mates until he found the mate that worked best for that particular pigeon. So I'd advise people do the same thing.
Nice. So let's get into your journey of judging the World Cup.
Okay.
First of all, I want to say thank you to you for going out. How long did you take? Did you say you were out there?
It was about 90 days.
So 90 days, you took 90 days out there. I want to say thank you, and I'm going to give you an applause for that. It takes a lot of work, a lot of time, and it's just probably tiring, you know, to go through two different weathers and all that. But tell us a little bit of your preparation and your scheduling for your fly.
So the first 5 weeks was in the United States and Canada. So North America was first. And it was a little different than most of what came later. There was a lot of flying. A lot of times when, for instance, in California, there were 3 different regions in California, but they weren't judged together. So I would judge the southern part and then travel around the North America, and then come back and do the middle part and go back around North America and eventually come back and do the northern part. And there was a lot of times in airports alone, because every airport that you go to, you have to arrive 2 hours early to make it through customs, and then a few hours for each flight. So there were days in North America that I was traveling 3 and 4 flights a day, and that was a lot of alone time. And one of the suggestions I made to Tony in the future, as something that might be easier on the judges and better for the flyers, would eventually be to see if it can be coordinated, which is what happened in Europe, where in Europe and South Africa and Australia, generally I would get driven from one guy to the next region, and then the next region, except when they were too far apart, then I had to fly. Mm-hmm. But in the United States, I was always on airplanes, and I think it would have been easier and cheaper for the club to put it on if it could have been arranged to have more drivers. Because when you're being driven, it's more enjoyable for the judge because you're meeting someone and you can chat. And it's very enjoyable for the flyers to have a chance to drive around with the judge and talk about things. So that's one change that I think would eventually help a little more. Because there in the United States, going around the United States, there were times that I was on the Atlantic and then the Pacific the next day, and then down near the Mexican border the next day, and then up in the north. And I really didn't know where I was half the time. As long as the regional reps knew that I had to get on a plane and get me on the next flight, it worked out. But in the places where I was able to get driven from one place to the other and then get switched to the new rep, I think it went a lot smoother, and it was much cheaper for for the organization too, because plane flights add up really quick. So that was kind of one observation. So after North America's 5 weeks, in order, I next went over to Ireland. Sorry, no. After the 5 weeks in North America, I went to Southern Europe and did the Balkan countries, starting down at Bulgaria and working my way north through Romania, Serbia, Bosnia, Croatia, and Slovenia. And then from Southern Europe, I went up to Ireland and stayed there and did all of Ireland, and then over to England, did all of England, of which there were many flyers. And then after England, it was South Africa, which had a large amount of flyers. I was there for more than 2 weeks. Wow. And then finished up in Australia.
So South Africa has a big how would you say it, a region, or not region, but
yeah, the two areas that are densest in the world, I would say, for the amount of roller flyers today, is the Midlands of England, back where everything started, somewhere around Birmingham or Middlesbrough. A lot of flyers, so many that many of the guys would have. There would be other kits in the air when they flew their own. It's that dense.
Nice.
And the other place where that's really dense for flyers is South Africa now. They have clubs that have like 40, 50 members in a regional club. And there's many big clubs in South Africa.
Yeah. I of course I went and picked you up at the airport, brought you here in my house. You stood here with me. And I try to do the very best to give you the hospitality that anything you wanted, I offered whatever you wanted. But talk to us a little bit of,
and it was great.
Talk to us a little bit about the hospitality, the greetings that people gave you from all around the world. How was that?
The hospitality was incredible. Every single place that I went, I was treated with the greatest hospitality. It was the time of my life. Hanging out, meeting the local guys, going to restaurants and for meals. I felt like I was treated like a king. It was just wonderful. It was the best part of the whole trip, was staying with guys, meeting. Every single place I went treated me as good as a guy could. It exceeded anything I expected. I was treated like a king. It felt that way. It was great.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, it's such an extraordinary opportunity, and I'm glad you got to do it. Because I've seen you judge, and I've been knowing you for quite a number of years. And I think you do a fantastic job. So when you mentioned, when it was mentioned that, we're thinking about Brian, I'm like, how can you go with anybody else? Yeah. There was other good guys on the list. Don't get me wrong. Well,
it must.
It was good.
It must have been a great opportunity. And you know what? Especially too, is like being able to experience the multiple cultures and I mean, it's something that. It's hard to be able to just say, I'm gonna go here and see how this country is all about. And you got to travel, man. Props to you. Congratulations.
Well, you're a teacher too, so I mean,
that helped.
I mean, that opportunity, you had to kind of blow your head up a little bit.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I was a geography teacher, so Tony managed to get me many plane flights where I could sit by the window. And I'm watching the world underneath me and thinking, okay, now that's got to be this ocean, and that's this sea, and this is this canyon or that mountain range, and that alone was incredible for me, just to look out the plane and know that, okay, I'm leaving Europe now, and I'm going across the Mediterranean, and next I'm going to see the Sahara Desert, and then the
Yeah.
jungle. It
Yeah.
was incredible.
Yeah, and you know much love and respect to the coordinators, Tony. We got Kevin Monroe, Eric Layler,
Yeah,
Yeah.
Dwayne with that wonderful the plaques and the
yeah.
trophy. Man, props to you, all you
Everybody,
guys. And you know
everybody did an
yeah, the
amazing job.
communication and scheduling.
Yeah.
That's a lot of work, man. And so much salute to you guys, man. For real, you
Oh
know.
yeah. Tony, Tony had to bail me out a few times because one of the things that happened that we weren't aware of that would happen was the World Cup was on at the same time, the soccer or football as they call it.
Hmm.
And so there were overloaded airports. And sometimes the airports were so overloaded that I missed my connecting flights. And then it was phoning Tony and saying, Tony, I need help. I'm stuck so and so.
Yeah.
See if we can find another way and another flight to get out to the places. And sometimes he was up late in the night trying to make sure that I could get to my next destination with a new flight. And so he put in a huge amount of effort to get me here, there, and everywhere, and everyone else did too.
Oh, I bet.
Once I was in care of the regional directors, it was all in their hands. I said, okay, as long as you guys get me to my next airport when I need to be, I'm good.
Now,
So I was taken care of so well.
did you pack light or how? I mean, because you're going from
I
cold to
packed
hot, you know what I mean?
I packed with 2 carry-ons only. So I had one the size of a briefcase, and I had one of the ones with wheels on it.
Because I've seen you
And
in some of the interviews with shorts and sandals. The other one with a
oh yeah,
big bomber jacket.
yeah,
You know.
yeah. When it was cold, some of the places were cold, and I knew I couldn't pack enough jackets, so I'd borrow whoever the local guy would lend me a jacket. That always worked out. Some of the countries were super hot, and some places didn't have air conditioning, so I just rolled with the punches. It worked.
Oh man, that's crazy.
So, Brian, I'm curious at you were all over the world. You saw rollers everywhere you went. Of course, that was what
Yeah.
you were doing. What did you see any similarities in what we all do? You know, per country. Did you see things that were different, or or how similar are all of us when it really comes down to the rollers all over the world?
The top guys tend to do things very similarly.
Hmm.
One of the things that I found, and it really stood out to see it, was the clubs that had the most friendship as the central core of the club was the friendship. Those clubs flew better birds
Hmm.
because in the parts of the world where the clubs were tight group of friends, they all work together to help each other out. And when the club gets more competitive, then the kip flies get more competitive in the same clubs.
Hmm.
Um, so that I really noticed quite quickly that the clubs where a lot of guys would show up to watch the guys fly because they wanted to support their other club members, those clubs generally had by far the best flyers. Um, some places, uh, it was almost as if competing was more important than the friendships. And in those clubs, there would often only be like one or two decent kits
Hmm.
because it was. I noticed this in the last 24 years. When I was in the United States going around judging different regions, I noticed that the clubs that had the most participants and where they were all friends, those clubs tended to have really good average flyers because they all were helping each other out and raising rounds for other guys or lending birds to other people. It tended not to be about money. It
Hmm.
tended to be, oh, so and so needs help this year. Let's all give them some birds or lend them some. So those clubs were the ones that far and away had more success.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I could see where also, it could become very competitive within a region or clubs to where, I got the best birds and I ain't gonna help you out. You know what I mean? So yeah, I could see, and you know what, being part of a club that you're actually gonna go through good competitors, it's a good club. You know what I mean?
yeah.
'Cause, yeah. Now, I've done a lot of traveling. And to me, when I go to somebody's loft, it's like I feel like a little kid in the candy store. You know what I mean? I'm
Yep.
like, man, and oh man, he's
Yep.
got this on there and he's got that, and I went to Ireland and got to experience Kevin McKinney's loft, and awesome, man. England, oh my God, man, pin my cribs right there. I mean, it's like
Yeah.
this. Tell us a little bit about your experience of the lofts around the world, and how they different, and what would you recommend? Where did you see the the better lofts out there?
Um, I guess part of that's weighted with the person's philosophy as far as what to do with the birds. Um, Personally speaking, I think pigeons can't be healthy unless they can fly. So my own prejudice has always been against seeing birds kept in small mating pens where they don't have the opportunity to get any sunlight or fly. Um, I think they're a flocking bird, and I think they do better when they can interact with their peers. Of course, the accuracy of what you breed is not 100%, but it'll be 90% or so if things are set up right. Um, and I think the birds are healthier. I know they are healthier when they have access to sunshine, moving air, space. So that's my own prejudice, and I did see some incredible lofts around the world that were just state of the art. My own prejudice in the hobby, and especially with me eventually coming down with lung problems, is with having more than 50 years in the hobby. I've seen a lot of old guys that do have lung problems that have had pigeons, and I think it's a myth that you have to worry about drafts. I know Monty Neibel used to say, "Look at those street pigeons." He said, "They don't have any shelter, and look how healthy they look." And I think modern thinking is birds need as much ventilation as you can provide. The more, the better. Especially racing homer. Many of the roller guys also play in the racing homer game, and they've learned that the birds need lots of ventilation. There's never too much, and it's healthier for the birds and it's healthier for the people. Um, there's so many lofts that I saw that were state of the art, and generally their birds did better. So I saw it like that was a really noticeable trend. The guys that put in the most work on the loft tended to be the guys that put the most work into flying their birds too, because they wanted to do everything right, as good as it could be done. And I think that really showed up.
Yeah, for sure. What was the difference? Like, what styles? I know, I been to England and they got these beautiful, like shed lofts and everything,
Yeah.
tiles and everything wood, and then I haven't gone to South Africa, which I want to go, and I hear that their lofts are all different metal, expanded metal to it. What was the different styles of
Um, I think most of the top fanciers tend to have what I call English style lofts. Um, it's lofts where the birds are fed in a common area, and then once they walk in, usually they come down to the ground and go in. Um, then the flyer opens the individual pen that the different kits will be kept in, because those kind of lofts let in sunlight. They have lots of air movement, and they a lot of them kind of generally resemble one another, because guys who travel a lot get ideas from seeing lofts that are better built than their own, and then the next time they move or want to make an improvement, they tend to add those features into their own loft. Back in the day, kit pens in the old days were often small rabbit hutch style dark lofts. And then I guess the next improvement on that was people started to put attachable wire pens that they could allow the birds to go out when they wanted and sit on the roof and get more sunshine. And if it was raining, they enjoy bathing in the rain. And I think anything that makes the pigeons feel better makes them fly better. The more space you can give them, the better you're going to be.
I bet you also saw some setups that are like, oh man, how could they keep the birds in there, huh?
Oh yeah, unfortunately, you do see some where the birds are crammed into tiny little spaces, and more often than not, those were places where the birds didn't do as well, because it's about unless your birds are healthy, they can't do well. And if they're kept in tiny little cages for very long, I think it hurts their health.
So, Brian,
Yeah.
go ahead. Go ahead. You were going to say something?
No, I was just going to say, all around the world, the best lofts have similarities.
Mm-hmm.
They're lofts made for the birds' comfort and keeping them happy and healthy.
I tell you, I also enjoyed the interviews you did with the flyers after.
Yeah.
I think that's a big plus. Um, and we sort of get to know the guys a little bit, you know.
Yeah. That was Tony's idea,
Yeah,
and I'm
great
glad that he
idea.
came up with that.
Yeah, it was a great idea, and I enjoyed every one of them. I really did. Um,
Yeah.
Now, when it comes down to birds, did you see any similarities all over the world when it came down to the best?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Almost every good kit, the birds are quite similar.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a lot of variation in what quality rollers look like or are built like.
Uh-huh.
One of the things that I think the hobby has learned, generally speaking, if you're watching the Olympics, which just ended for humans, you notice that you don't see 6 foot plus gymnasts.
Yeah.
Gymnasts are small, and it's the same with roller pigeons. You don't that they handle within a very narrow range.
Mm-hmm.
They're a small bird. They're muscular. They tend to resemble one another quite a bit. I guess the biggest variation that you see around the world is, as most people know, Monty Neibel preferred self birds because he found they weren't suffering from predators as much as colored birds do.
Mm-hmm.
But other than the sort of different colors that you see in different lofts, the best pigeons that spin, the best kit pigeons, they pretty much handle alike, no matter where you are.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Brian, we want to get into your judging and a few kits that you judge, but first of all, I would like for you to give us an explanation on your way of judging. If you could kind of in your best way tell us how you will start off like with the multipliers. how do
Sure.
you how do you determine or evaluate quality and depth as far as the
Okay.
multipliers?
So for me, once the birds are released and time's been called in, at that point, every single break that I see, I try and determine not how many pigeons did something, but how many pigeons did something that was impressive. By that, I mean, I don't want to score action. I want to score roll, which is falling balls, looking like balls that are falling beneath the kit. Um, every time I score a break, I'm thinking 12 birds did something. And in my head, I'm thinking, but 6 of them did it impressively. So I'm calling the 6.
Mhm.
Um, I've never, just, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, it's just me. Um, I've never scored more than 12 on a break. I've seen breaks that were bigger than 12, but not 12 that are doing it properly on a break is a very high number for me. Most breaks are 5, 6, 7, small numbers. But each break you score, you're supposed to apply the depth and the quality multipliers to the average of that break. So every break that I score in my head, I'm thinking, okay, depth, thinking quality, depth, quality, just in the back of my mind, which each break that I call. Um, Action's not good enough. So when it comes to quality, I'm thinking of birds that don't have their wings out sideways. They're not twizzling. They're not coming out wrong. They're coming out like a spinning ball with the wings more or less above the bird, or sometimes even tighter than that. That's quality. They have to come out in the right direction. They have to immediately try and get back. As some people think that deep birds are they're hesitant, thinking, well, deep birds are going to take longer to get back. But according to the rules, as long as they're doing their best to get back, they're not out. If they break, they come out in the right direction and they're trying to get back to the kit, they're in, with one exception. If they roll before they get back on their own, then they are definitely out because they've shown they're not a team player, and you need team players to win in this sport. So as far as quality goes, um, you watch from the beginning of the break to the end, and then you make sure that they're headed back and doing the best they can before I would score another break, because I have to watch the first group first, because if they come out backwards and fly off in the wrong direction, then they're definitely out. So I can only watch one group of birds at a time until I know that they're headed back. As far as depth,
Oh, real quick,
um,
I don't mean
Chuck,
excuse me for interrupting you,
Chuck,
but before we
no,
go to the depth, the majority of the quality multipliers that you gave out um were around 1413. That's not
mm-hmm,
saying the first the top four, but
right.
1413. How do you determine like a 1.1, a 1.2,
Okay, that's good.
1.3? How do we
Um,
know what to give?
the way I was trained by Monty Neibel was 1-4 was the word he said, that's good birds.
Mhm.
So 1-4s, you can be proud of flying 1-4s for quality. Um, Again, that's the average quality. It's not the best of them. It's if you score an 8 bird break, It's trying to think in your head of those 8 that I just called, how many are the kind that I would want to use? In other words, be a good bird. So 1-0 is, of course, the bare minimum. That's often birds that are really borderline. Again, it's depth. So I'll go back to quality. They're acceptable, but they're not impressive. And 1-2, 1-3 is getting close to what you would like. And for me, 1-4 is okay. You can be, that's a good bird. 1-4. As far as going past 1-4, for me, 1-5, 1-6, 1-7, which is the top, the best that I've awarded. Those are becoming rare. 1-4s are good birds that you see fairly frequently. 1-5s, 6 or 7s, which is the highest I've ever given for quality, are birds that are exceptionally good. I've never gone in 24 years higher than 1-7 for either quality or for depth. So I think it's a mistake to go much higher than that, because if you, for instance, award a 1 or a 2, if someone's awarded a 2, he's painted himself into a corner, because if he sees something either higher quality or deeper, he can't fix it. So by allowing those 1, 8, 9s and 2s, which I've never awarded, I'm prepared that if I see an exceptional kit and then see one that's even more exceptional, I've still got room above that I can use. As far as depth, again, for me, depth multipliers, a 1-4 is good depth. Good depth for me is, I'm going to say 20 feet. Or some people do it in South Africa. They used to do it by timing the depth with a stopwatch. In my head, I know that the telephone poles around where I live are 40 feet. And those are very, very rare to see the average break anywhere near that. I think most kits that win are approaching between 25 to 40 feet. But again, they're not something you see often, because you're not supposed, I think some judges perhaps err on thinking, wow, there were 4 really deep ones there, so I'm going to award a high depth. But the depth multiplier is, again, supposed to be awarded for the average on that break, not the deep ones. So you always should be thinking, in my opinion, on what was the average of that quality. So I don't know if that's confusing or it makes sense, but I'm hesitant to, the highest I've ever given personally is 1-7, 1-7. And that was where I thought that was exceptional quality and exceptional depth. And personally, that's the highest I've ever gone.
How deep would you say 1.7 is?
Oh, they're averaging close to 40 feet.
40 feet? Okay.
In my opinion,
and
yeah.
What, in your opinion, what is, let's just say a 1.1?
Maybe a dozen feet. It's a little better than the bare minimum of 10.
Okay.
But by the time they're 1-4, again, using that as a good bird, which is Monty said good, that's an impressive pigeon. Yeah. Well, now, one thing I would like to remark on, because one time I've heard this from many judges that I admire, and I agree with them. You can see depth. You can assess depth when you're judging from a greater distance than you can assess quality. Mm-hmm. Because when you're watching a kit that's getting out there where it's uncomfortably high or uncomfortably laterally too far from you, off in the distance. You can see depth because you can see separation between the kit and the birds that you're seeing that are breaking. But quality needs the birds to be close
Like
to accurately, you know what I mean?
Like what happened to Sean Overfield.
Right. So that was the one that kept me up that night. And I felt that obligated to explain that the quality that I saw when they were close, which was not very long, were good. They were really good. But when they got to out there near the limits of my vision horizontally, and I kept going across many fields, backyard fields, to get closer and closer and closer, but the birds kept moving further. I knew I couldn't award a high quality for that because I couldn't really accurately assess it when they were as far away as they were, which kind of reminds me of something that Monty Neibel used to say. He said, "It's your job to keep them in my face."
Yeah.
That's
and like we'll get back to
yeah.
Sean's kit, but
Yep.
a lot of us would think like I've gone through like different ways of kind of judging the depth, and some people say you judge it by duration, and you
Mm-hmm.
go a 1.0 maybe 10 feet, 1.1 15 feet, 1.2
Yeah.
20, what I mean, so they round
Yep.
it off to the 5 10 15 20s. You're here
Yep.
telling us like a 1.2 or a 1.1 would be 12 feet. And
Well, I'm just saying a little
yeah,
deeper than the
yeah,
minimum.
yeah, and
Yeah.
that's good. I mean, if overall, it's being consistent through the whole
Yeah.
fly. I mean,
Yeah.
whatever, however you feel that is the way that the multipliers is put together. I
Yeah.
mean, but as because if you look at it, those people that will see it, a 1.4 being 30 feet, 35 feet, 40 feet maybe. I mean, a 117, they're already looking at maybe 60 plus feet. You know what I'm saying? So, and
By some people, yeah.
yeah, yeah, and the thing is, like, you scored Hana's score was 56 breaks, and you gave it a
Yes.
1.7 on a depth. So
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure there's a lot of people saying there's no way that could be that deep and go right
Yes,
back up.
I
And
don't use that formula.
yeah,
For
okay,
me, the way I could explain it between the two top flyers, Brian McCormick and Hannes Russo, was they were as deep a kit, and they both had very high quality because it was also 1.7. I'm thinking that's the deepest average that I've seen. So for me, with 24 years of judging, if a kit's the deepest average that I've seen or close to it, that's why for being rare as a word, that was 1.7. I've 4 times in my life I've given 1.7s, and one was Kenny Billings for depth. One was Billy Dyer, and one was Brian McCormick, and one was Hannes Russo. And the average depth of those birds was as deep as I've ever seen on average.
yeah,
And I
you
left myself 8s and 9s and the impossible 2 because so far I haven't seen any deeper than that. And
yeah,
that's my
yeah.
own personal max is 1.7.
Yeah, you also gave Jeff DeWitt a 1.7, and then even on Sean Overfield, when you did the second interview, you said that you should have given him a 1.7.
Yeah. Yeah. I thought about it, and it's possible because I think any judge that's trying to do his best is constantly thinking about how consistent am I being. I want to stay consistent. So you're always having that internal conflict where you're thinking, oh, which if I might add, I'd like to say a pet peeve about some judges. Is that appropriate without naming them?
Yeah, sure.
So one of the pet peeves, and it was one of Monty's pet peeves too, was when judges and the scribe stood way off in the distance away from the audience and didn't announce what they were scoring. Because as a teacher, it's supposed to be educational to have your birds judged. And I think the right thing to do when possible is to call out your scores so people can hear them, because then they get an idea what you're seeing.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that was even more maddening than scribes and judges that went off and stood far away from everyone, and this one really bugged me, and it really bugged Monty when we saw it with other judges, was at the end of the 20 minutes, time has been called. And sometimes in the past, I've seen judges and scribes take 5 minutes to announce which multipliers they're going to use.
Mm-hmm.
They're off on their own.
Mm-hmm.
They're chatting. Sometimes they're flicking through pages. And even if they're not doing it, it seems like they're trying to figure out whether they should go with a higher number or a lower number.
Yeah.
Whereas Monty said to do it, and I've always done it, within the 30 seconds or so of the kit finishing, I announce my depth and my quality. I don't want to look over the raw score before I do that, because I don't want to be prejudiced.
Right.
I want it to be a surprise for me who wins, because I don't want to come in hoping someone will win. I want the numbers to be whatever they are, and right away at the end of the fly, I want to say my quality and depth multipliers are this.
Mm-hmm.
And then the scores will be what they end up adding up to be. But it should be a surprise to me and any judge as far as who finishes top and who doesn't.
Yeah, and you know what?
Yeah, I think
Go ahead.
I think your instincts tell you by the time you're done what that quality and depth should be.
Yeah.
Quality and depth factor should be. And
yeah.
And you shouldn't question your instincts.
Right.
Because if you're doing what you just mentioned, it does become questionable. You know, you're questioning it in your own head, and everybody else is questioning it too.
And not only that, but me as a as someone in the back looking at the flies, you know, I'm in my head training my mind on how to judge. Mm-hmm. And by hearing you speak it, yell it out loud, hey, that would have been a 10, but they're 7 actually separated and showed the quality of giving a 7. And that gives me like a transparent of what it is to actually score by comparing my score with the actual judge's score. And not only that though, but by you saying out the scores loud, and when the fly is over, saying the multiplier to me is telling me that you're a confident judge. And if you're not a confident judge, then you shouldn't be judging. That's the way I'd look at it.
Yeah. And for me, because 1-4, going back to Monty's idea, is a good pigeon, we all kind of, if we've traveled a bit, we know what good pigeons are. So a 1-4 is to me, it's a pat on the back. You've got good birds. 1-5, 1-6, and 1-7, if I put a word to it, it would be very good pigeon, maybe 1-5, really good pigeon 1-6, and exceptional 1-7. I mean, they're rare. They're not a number when you get past 1-4 and you're watching quality birds around the world, anything over 1.4 means this is noticeably either deeper than most people have, or they're better quality than most people have.
Yeah.
So that's
You,
just kind of words that I always put beside them.
yeah.
Again, that's with my depth. I don't do it by guessing the feet. I do
Mhm.
it by saying 1.4 I'd be happy with,
Mhm.
1.5 I'd be really happy with, 1.6 they're getting
Yeah.
rare, and 1.7s are really rare.
Yeah.
So that
You
I
got.
just use words as opposed to trying to figure out an average number.
Yeah, you got Tu Yang says those that go by 5 feet increments, a 1.7 is impossible, let alone a one
Oh
eight
yeah,
or a
well,
1.9
of course,
or if
because
it
five
or
bird
yeah
break is tough enough to
or if
to think about, but when a 10 bird break goes, um, there's not many double digit
yeah,
breaks
and he says like if
on
if
most kits.
if that's even impossible, why even have a 1.8, let alone a 2.0? And you know what, like to me, like I think the way that multipliers is, it's confusion, and you'll never have two, like the judges score like around in the circle, like almost the same, it's always going to be
Yeah,
a different, because
yes,
it's too much for a 1.0 to 2.0. And I think it
yeah,
should be like a 1.0 or a one, either 1.1, 2, or 3, 3 being the best. Two, it's about, I think things should change. And my next question is to you is, do you think that things should change as far as the scoring from the World Cup? Because
well, no, the reason, the way it was put to me, and I think it's valuable, it works for me, is to think of your the way it was put to me. Some umpires have a small strike zone, some umpires have a big strike zone. Nobody gets upset as long as your strike zone is consistent, because one of the things that Monty told me, and I laughed about it and found it to be very true, he said, if you're a judge that awards high scores, a lot of, especially beginning flyers, will be very impressed with a high score, because they'll say to themselves, wow, this is the highest score I've ever got. And they
Mhm.
smile.
Mhm.
And Monty said, the score that you give is irrelevant. All that matters is your placement from low to high. So one one guy can award a guy a 2,000 point for a great kit, and another guy can award a guy 1,000 points for a great kit, and it doesn't matter as long as that, because
That's
being
where
that
you
it's
come.
one individual doing the best they can to be consistent,
Right.
it doesn't matter the score you get. What matters is where do you finish in placement.
Yeah.
I think that's way more important.
Yeah, yeah. Not only that, Brian. I think that no matter how to score it, if it were totally different from the way it is now, if there wasn't, a 2.0, and a depth and quality factor, if that all wasn't there, you still would have people upset or question how the score was given.
Oh, absolutely. The
I
joke
mean,
is, and it's
yeah,
somewhat true,
yeah,
that the joke
right.
is that the only really happy guys are the guys who win.
The guys
And
who win.
yeah.
I
I think
knew,
and then in that case, if it's to that point, it's really gonna come out to a good judge being somebody that probably has a good depth in at their backyard, and that has
Mhm.
gone many backyards, and has evaluated it in their mind, the depth concept. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Because
the more,
somebody's
yes,
depth would be different than what you just explained.
Yeah,
And what you
yeah.
just explained, it's telling me that it wasn't necessarily what a lot of these guys think it was, a 70-foot roller or whatever, a 1.7.
Right.
And it's actually fair, you know, the way you put it together, and it makes sense on the way you judged it, you know.
Well, I think that's why for me it works better to have a word rather than a footage. So if a 1.4 is good and a 1.5 is very good and a 1.6 is really good and a 1.7 is about as good as I've seen, I can repeat that in my own mind because I'm not putting a number to it. I'm just saying this is a fine quality kit of rare either depth or quality or both. So I think it'll always vary because uh, some judges are much more liberal about what they see. I guess the thing that I'm saying is the more widely traveled that a judge is and the more judging that they've done, odds are they're going to be more accurate in their placement.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Right.
especially if they
Yeah.
live in an area where there's lots of good flyers.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, and because I'm gonna tell you, man, one guy's 10 foot is another guy's 25 footer. You know
All
what I
right.
mean?
Well,
And you know
shouldn't be
what's
that bad, but yeah, I know what you're
yeah,
saying.
you know
But
Absolutely.
yeah,
consistency matters.
yes. You
Yes,
know,
it
Dave
does.
Glenn's he said a comment that says I noticed it seemed like Brian's quality and depth were always close. Did he not see any fast, tight, clean breaks in shorter pigeons?
That's a good point.
Good question. Yeah.
Um, and they normally are somewhat linked because I think the human eye, or at least mine, if the pigeons are rolling deeper, it gives me a second or two longer to assess how good they are. And um, that's a good point because I've never seen dramatic differences like a 1.0 for quality and depth. They usually are somewhat linked because, but I understand the question. Birds. One of the things that I've noticed about beginning flyers is often they get very attached to deep, extremely deep pigeons because they can notice them and they watch them. If they're falling 4 or 5 seconds, that's very impressive to many young flyers. More experienced flyers, I think, will say to themselves, yes, that was a 50 or 60-foot roll, but it came out like a dish rag um, rather than a spinning ball. Because I think that I haven't reviewed my own scoring, but I think I gave a 1.3 and a 1.6 with Sean Overfeld because they were so far most of the time that I was at my limit. I could tell that they were working. I could tell they were breaking. I could tell they were deep, but I couldn't accurately assess. I guess the thing I'm trying to say is that everybody who flies their birds between 200 and 300 feet is going to average better than birds that are out where you're having trouble seeing them. Meaning there's a built-in reward to keep your birds in the judge's face.
At what time were his birds to the point where you weren't able to adjust the quality? Like a 5 minute
I
mark?
can't put a number on it. I knew there's a point at which following them, I said to my scribes and the guys that were beside me, I can't score anymore. I can't. They're too far.
I've
And
heard people or that have judged would say that in situations like that they'll go by the point where the birds were near to where they're able to to judge, so they'll go
That's
with that.
exactly right.
You know,
And everybody's vision is different. I know mine was tested at 2020 with contact lenses, but with the very expensive sunglasses that I bought, prescription, they said, now you've got 2010. So I know I'm able to read the line below 2020 with the glasses that I used. And I used the glasses for all my judging because I thought if I can see better with these high quality Polaroid sunglasses, I'm going to wear them for all my judging instead of using my contacts, which only could get me to 2020.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So the numbers do tend to somewhat go together. Because impressive pigeons, I can't ever thinking of seeing really impressive quality in 10 footers because it's only it's less than a second you would have to determine that.
that's one thing that I've always said. Like, I've seen scores that are, you get 10 footers and they get a 1.6. Like, how in the world did you determine that? You know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
like,
see, and I can't, so that's why I think they're a little bit linked. Usually, at least going by memory, usually they're within a few points of one another when I scored, that the ones that averaged a little deeper usually had higher quality. Because again, often they were more experienced. They're the kind of competitors that have been around a long time. And the best kits are usually flown by more experienced competitors who've been around a long time. And experienced competitors usually care about quality as well as depth.
yeah.
So,
So would you say that you keep the World Cup rules or and not change anything, or you think
the only I suggested a few changes, three of them. I'll just I bounced these off of a lot of guys, and more often than not, they agreed with me. The two changes I would make is because of predators and because many new flyers have trouble finding 20 good birds, which is the optimum. Way back in the day, Joe Houghton noticed that there was no rule on maximum, and he won a kit fly by flying, I think it was 40 birds. But that ended. They fixed that and said no, the maximum's 20. But it was kind of funny and creative. But I think because of predation being a big thing in our hobby, worse now than it's ever been, I don't think we need a minimum. Because sometimes young guys especially are more beginning fanciers or guys living with real heavy predators. I see no reason for a minimum. If a guy could win a kit competition flying 12 birds, that would be like a miracle, because I think it's easier to score when you're closer to 20. Mm-hmm. Because so personally, I said I don't think we need a minimum number of birds, because you're not going to win kit competitions with little kits, in my opinion. So that was one change. I thought if a guy was sitting at 15, 16, and then a day before the fly, or 17, and he loses a couple of birds and now he's 14, I personally thought, let him fly as 14. His chance of him beating a guy with 20 is slim to none. So that was one change.
Yeah.
They
And
also,
I hear you on that one, man. It's fair. Like, one thing I wanna kind of figure out a way to give people opportunities, those that have issues with the BOP, and that's
yes,
pretty cool, man. Like you said, are they gonna take it? Who knows? But it's a lesser opportunity.
yeah, but rather than giving him a 0, that was the one, or like he can't fly. So the second change that I made, again, it's a little more controversial. but I thought, as far as many times I've judged where birds have come down seconds from the minimum 15-minute mark. And it sucks, and they get 0, and they're very discouraged. And again, personally speaking, I thought if a guy's birds land early, once the second bird comes down, it's over, period. No need to punish him further by giving him a DQ, because I can't envision kits winning that fly 10, 12, 13 minutes over a guy who's got birds that are had the full 20 turn points. So that was another one I thought, just when the second bird comes down, he stops scoring. That's enough punishment. The punishment is built in because he could have had 6, 7, 8 more minutes to score points if they flew the full 20.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that I thought about, and many guys like this idea, was I thought we should have what are called legacy flyers. So the guys who've scored perhaps in the top 10 or who've perhaps won a World Cup, if a judge is in their region anyway, and the famous old flyer who's renowned in his area wasn't able to qualify, let him qualify perhaps as a legacy flyer. So you're already there, and the guy who's finished in the top 10 in the World Cup a number of times, let him also fly. Let the guys who beat him to be the rep fly, of course, but maybe let the legacy guy, the guy that's famous for having good pigeons, fly also in that same region. I can understand why some would say, but he shouldn't. It should only be a score that gets put up, not count. I can understand that rationale. But I think when you see World Cup guys that are famous for being top level flyers in the world miss, and I still think that they've earned a place to have a judge look at their birds too.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just a guess. That's just an opinion.
Not a bad idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
because
yeah, I get it. You know, you get to see those guys. You know, you get to see see them fly birds and
why they're famous.
Yeah, and see why.
Like for instance, on this trip, I've known George Mason for at least 40 years. He used to come out and fish with Monty and I, and we would bump into each other in California, all over North America. And I treasure the day that I had off that George was able to fly all his kits for me. They were really good. They didn't qualify that particular year. And I think of flyers like Heine Biker, who have won the World Cup 4 times, but unfortunately, most of the guys that were regularly getting beaten by him in Holland stopped flying. And I think since I was already in Holland, personally, I think a guy like that deserves to put up a kit. So it was just a thought of something that might broaden the appeal of the hobby to a few extra people, famous people.
What do you I know you were talking about earlier that you like to see the birds, execute the roll and go right back up, and
Yeah.
if as they're going up, if they roll, then it's considered them being out before they get to
Yes.
the kit. What do you consider waterfall? I mean, and the reason I'm saying is like, what if this
good
kit?
point.
What if the kits, the bird? They just say there's 7 birds they broke. They're going back to the kit, and 5 broke before these get to the kit. Would you score the 5, or do you gotta wait till the kit is together and working as a team, since it's considered teamwork?
I'm not saying that my way is the right way. But I will say, I know people that have argued that if, let's say, 7 birds break and you're watching the 7 and they come out and start to head towards the kit, then and say 5 new ones go, you should call a 7 and call a 5 also. Personally, I don't do that because I need to see that there's a I need to see that they're basically getting back, because sometimes birds will head like they're going to come back and then change directions and either start rolling by themselves away from the kit, which Monty Neibel used to say was a cull, and I agree, because it shows it's not many times, and more often in the US than other places. I would meet guys without birds and I'd say, why, how come you flew that bird? And they'd say, well, it's one of my best spinners. And I'm thinking, no, it's not one of your best spinners because it's out half the time. It's a cull. And I know that a non-performing bird in a loft, in a kit, rarely, it doesn't cost you any points because there's not a bunch of people getting 20-bird breaks. So if you have 3 or 4 or 5 that don't go on a break, there's nothing wrong with having non-spinners in your kit. But to have birds that you consider to be your best spinners, but they're really poor kitters, they haven't learned a valuable lesson that you have to fly kits without those birds, which is one of the reasons why many of the top flyers fly their kits of 20, 22, 23, 24 birds. Because I know Monty, to speak of one, always liked to subtract birds, never add them. Because if you add birds to get enough for a kit and they haven't flown with that kit, they will often not fly together. Whereas if you subtract birds, this was Monty's big deal for the week or two prior to a competition, Monty was thinking, which are my 4 weakest that I'm taking out, as opposed to guys who who want to add birds to a kit. Adding birds is really dangerous. Subtracting birds from a kit is not dangerous. So when I see flyers that fly iffy kitters because they happen to spin impressively, I think they're going in the wrong direction. They have to kit well first, because all the top flyers are the kind of guys who almost always have great kitting pigeons, because they put a lot of importance on only flying really good kitting pigeons.
Yeah, good point. No, and then earlier we were talking about you know any changes and stuff like that, and like you said, the you know allowing the flyers to keep their score. Um, many will say that's not fair because my kid flew 20 and I could have won, and you know what I'm saying. So it's never gonna be fair. Just like Ray said, no matter where we change anything, what I
Yeah,
like to see is more of a standard as far as everybody pretty much is judging close to the same. You know what I mean? But it is what it
we'd
is.
all love that, but we can't do it because it's one person's opinion.
Yeah, yeah,
And I think that judges who get asked back and repeatedly in various places that they judge, obviously you can't please everyone, but if you're pleasing enough club members that they want somebody to come back again, it probably shows that you're not a lot of people are disagreeing very much.
yeah. No, and you know what? You're straightforward. Um, we got to the Flyers house, and you're straightforward saying, "Hey, this is the way I judge, and this is what I want to see." I'm gonna call out the score, and it is what it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you felt that it looked like you had a lot of confidence. I mean, that's the main thing, you know, because when you have a lot of confidence, you're gonna be consistent. No matter how you judge, you're gonna be consistent. You know what I mean? And you right off the bat, you said I've never scored over 1,000 points, and you know what? Your overall uh final results on every single flyer, we didn't have no doubles except for
Well,
the was it Hannes, Brian, the
yes.
Sean didn't have no doubles, so just those two flyers. So you're pretty
Oh, there
consistent.
were, yeah, with Hannes, because I don't remember how much I'm calling out. When I finished, I counted up the score 3 or 4 times
Yeah,
because I was so surprised at the fact that I had now, for the first time in my life, gone anywhere close to 1,000.
Mhm.
But it was because of the 56 breaks, um, that to have a set of pigeons that breaks that many times over 20 minutes
yeah,
was exceptional. And the birds of Brian McCormick, who had had the lead for a long time, though their kits were very similar in that they both had depth, they
yeah.
both had quality, but Hannes happened to have as many breaks in the last quarter and the third quarter and the second
Yeah.
almost as he had in the first.
And you know what? Yeah, I remember telling you when you said I never scored 1,000 points. I said, well, you know, we got Brian McCormick scoring 3,000 points out here, and you're like, we'll see. You know what I mean? We'll see. So I was like, oh man,
Yeah,
he, you know. And then when you gave him the score you did, 627.13.
yeah.
I was like, dang, you know what? You know, he was pretty tough. And then you normally see uh doubles and triples and everybody scoring Brian McCormick, and here you are just giving him 5, 6, 5, 6, 10, 5, 12. You know what I mean? I was like, man, you know what I mean? And I was like, ain't nobody gonna beat Brian now. You know what I mean? He's a
Well, I
the
thought that too.
you know,
I
and
thought
like you said, he
I
went
thought
all
he
the
had
way,
won
man.
it for.
Yeah, you know what? If you was to take away the raw score and quality and the depth, who had the better birds, man? Brian or Hannes, man? If you to be
Well,
honest,
they
you
were the
close your
same.
eyes and
No,
say,
they were both as good as you will see. Um, the difference being that Brian would be the first to admit, he wasn't happy with his birds prior to letting them out, because he said some of them still had food and water in them, and he made last minute substitutions, which I know nobody would want to do, but he succeeded in spite of doing that. So he obviously made great substitutions, but it was uncanny that Hannes Russo, if I'm going by memory, something like 19 in the first 5 minutes, which is exceptional. But the
Mhm.
fact that he was still going with 12 and 13 breaks, and for a full hour afterwards, they were
Yeah,
still scoring.
yeah.
So I think he had his birds prepped a little better, but I can't choose one over the other. Um,
yeah.
I
Now
know,
on these breaks that you gave them, there were fives, sixes, five,
yeah,
sixes, sevens. Now
yeah,
earlier you were saying that yeah, there could be big breaks, and but not necessarily everything's accountable for it, and so you're only going to give them a
right.
certain amount. Now in these breaks, were they actually big breaks to where you said, man, I'm only going to give them that, or they're just sevens and
Oh,
fives? How did you see that? Because the reason I'm asking you is because, like I said earlier, there's people giving him 14, 18, 17 bird breaks. You know what
yes,
I mean?
I've seen, and personally, I've never seen a 14, 15, or 16 bird break where I thought they were all doing it right.
Mhm.
I've talked to some guys and I say, well, what did your 16 bird break look like? And they said, well, I know it was 16 because I looked up and there were only four that were where they started. And I'm thinking, so that means every one of the 16 that you called out as a 16 were doing it properly? I've not seen that in my life. Just to go back again and state this, I watched Monty Neibel, uh, birds more than any other human alive, and he was at the time the world's best flyer.
Mhm.
And so I really have a good picture in my head what great kits can do because I saw a great one more than most anybody on earth. Um, and probably among the top in the world now. And only Hannes beat him with his four-time wins.
Yeah.
So when you see great birds fly as often as I was fortunate enough to be able to do, you have pretty high standards about what you think roller kits can do, are capable of.
Mhm.
And one judge that came to my place, who I respect a lot as a pigeon man, and he does really well. When I was watching, no, now my brain's going into overload. Rick Mee. Rick Mee was judging my birds one time. Monty was also there watching, and I popped them up, and Monty said, after the kit was done, he said, you didn't have them right on, but you had them close. And for Monty to say that made me puff my chest up. Rick gave me a score, as I remember it, was something around 580, high fives, somewhere around there. And then he said, what? When he handed me the score, Rick Mee said, what do you think of my score? And I said to Rick with a grin, but seriously, I said, you're about 30% higher than I would have given them. So I didn't view my own pigeons better than most judges did. I was usually more strict on my own birds than judges often were.
Well,
So
Now,
each judge is a little bit different, but there's something
of course,
that we
yeah,
shouldn't overlook
yeah.
yeah,
that
yeah,
you said on
yeah,
Heinrich's kit. In his last quarter, the birds were still scoring big. They were scoring as big, breaking as big
That's the first quarter, yeah.
as
yes,
the first quarter. That's
and there
not
were
that's not
and
common.
Yeah.
no, and there were double-digit breaks in the last quarter.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you that's not. You
That's
could
not
go
normal.
for
Brian,
years. It is not normal. You could go
No,
around and see kids over and over again for weeks,
yeah,
and rarely will you see that
of
where
course,
the breaks increase because they usually
yes,
diminish as you go through the fly.
yes,
The birds are getting tired. I
yep,
mean, he had
yep.
them all.
Brian, would you say from going around and watching all these flies to be able to execute all these breaks, would you say that Han has mastered conditioning those birds for that? Did you see those birds? I mean, you saw those birds coming out to the point where
Well,
they came down and landed. How were they? I mean, did you see those
well,
birds?
he did things that I have not seen before. In that, an hour later, they were still up in the air. Hour after time was called, still working hard. And he's the only flyer that I've met who doesn't feed his birds when they come down. He feeds his birds at 6 in the evening, regardless of when he flies them.
Mm.
He will put a little tiny bit of trapping mix to get them, if they, if there's predators around, he wants them to get rejoin and get in the kit box. But he feeds his pigeons at 6 o'clock every evening, regardless of when he flies them, which is something very unique. And
Yeah.
that's why I asked permission if he minded that I showed his exact mixes, and he said, no, if it helps anyone, here's the formula that I used. And he showed exactly how he fed, and I took pictures of that. And I had never met or heard of anyone who always fed his pigeons same time every day, regardless of when he flew them. So maybe he's onto something. I know he actually came to my place once and flew, judged my birds. So I knew him from way back. I think it was something like 1994 or something. But I remembered Hannes from that. And I knew that he had come a few top 10 finishes. So it was obvious he was a guy that was progressing. Mm-hmm. And most of the people, when I asked, where do your birds go back from? Hannes said, well, I started with 3 of these 30 years ago. So I knew that he, more than most people, could actually call them his family.
Yeah.
Because they had been with him forever. And he had developed a strain that he obviously still is tweaking to get them to do better and better things.
So would you say that so the majority of his birds breaking within the first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter were around the 40-footers?
Again, I don't like putting feet on it.
Okay. I'm just saying because you gave it a 1.7. You know what I'm saying?
They were deep pigeons.
They're deep pigeons. Okay, good.
And that the quality was evident. In most of the top guys around the world, I'll say for all of the top 10 guys, they all had kits that could well have scored a lot more given perfect weather and perfect circumstances. Because if you're even in the top 20 in a World Cup competition, you're showing that you've got something pretty special.
Yeah.
And anyone that gets to represent their region, even that is something to be proud of.
Now, for the amount of breaks, 56 breaks, they had to snap out and boom, right back to the kit. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of people might think that that's not possible, but we got our first World Cup champion, Joe Rowe, hit 58 breaks. You know what I mean?
Right.
And his multipliers were low, but back then, no one would score that high multipliers.
Yeah.
And who
it's
knows?
Just rare territory.
Yeah, and who knows? Yeah. Norm Reed judged that one, and maybe his concept of judging that multiplier was kind of similar to yours, to where but it's possible. I mean, like I said, Joe Rowe hit 58 breaks. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And right off the top, I will say that probably only 10% of the flyers had the weather that they would have hoped for. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of really good flyers in the world who didn't show up in the top 10 or 20 simply because the weather sucked when it was their time to fly.
Yeah, and then just like one of my I would not say like a fear or anything, but my worries would be to see a big movement of 15 birds. How did you, like I said, Brian McCormick's been getting all these big breaks, you know what I'm saying? How are you visualizing the ones that you were scoring, the 6s and 5s? I mean, would that be the separation from the other ones, or?
No, it's to me, it's usually it's a quality thing that you're thinking in your head. Mm-hmm. Like many times I hear people in the audience going, ooh, was that 15? Was that 16? And I'm thinking, yeah, 16 did something.
Yeah.
But 8 of them did it really well.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
So I'm trying to look for those spinning balls.
Yeah, I've seen it, man. I've seen it. Oh, that was almost a 20. It was almost a 20 bird break,
Right.
and with a 1-7, I was like, man, what?
I've I've only seen one in my life that I'd like to mention. Way back when I was 14 or 15, Monty and I were in the backyard of Lloyd Thompson, a
Mhm.
famous old British Columbian flyer. And the birds grouped, they were flying wingtip to wingtip, very tight. And they came in together and kind of bunched up, and they turned into a wind right over our head, and they let loose. And every pigeon ended close to where they all ended. And Monty started slapping me on the back painfully, banging me on the back, saying, Brian, Brian, you may never see this again. You just witnessed a 20 bird turn. And I've never seen one since. But it was the perfect break. And I'm going to say by memory, it was 20 to 25 feet deep. It wasn't exceptionally deep,
Mhm.
but they all ended where they started, and every bird spun well. And because Monty slapped my back so hard, he told me, never forget what you've seen just now. He says, you might never see it again.
How would
And
you
that was Monty being excited about his competitor, which
how
was the
how
other
how
thing I
would you
loved about Monty.
how would you
When
compare Hannes's bird? Oh, go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead. Go
No,
ahead.
I was just going to say the thing I loved best about Monty was when he saw a great kit anywhere, he was as excited as the flyer was.
Mhm.
Yeah, I bet, man. Hey,
That's
Yeah,
what it's all about,
that's
right?
a true roller
yeah,
man right there. You know
that's
what I mean?
exactly.
100%. You know what? A round of applause for Monty, man. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Well, the
He
South
was
Africans told me almost to the man. They said we used to do timing flyers with the stopwatch, and we used to be more individual birds development. And they said once Monty visited our country, they said he changed everything because
Mhm.
they said the advice that he gave them started to go through all the clubs in South Africa. And they all thought if we listen to what Monty said, maybe in the future we can fly those kind of kits. And just shortly before Monty died, actually about a month before, I remember him saying that I said, which area of the world do you think is going to rise? And he said, South Africa. He
Mhm.
says, there's one club in Pretoria, I think he said had 80 club members. And he
nice.
said, they're all doing it right now. So the South Africans sing his praises
Shout out, salute to
for
South
teaching them.
Africa.
South
You guys are
Africa.
doing it, man. You know what I mean? You
Yeah.
guys are doing it, man. But you know what? I'm working hard, so
Yeah.
we're gonna have a rise
Yeah.
out here too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
Brian, let me
I was just gonna ask him,
go ahead, Jared.
compare Hannes's birds to what you were used to seeing at Monty's.
Very similar.
Hmm. Hmm.
Very similar. And the top, like I'll just go by this World Cup that I just finished. um, any of the top 10 guys had birds that on the right day could have been world class.
Hmm.
You know, most of them didn't have the perfect weather they wanted, but there's good kits all over the world now. One area I'd give a shout out to one particular flyer is when I was in the Balkans, which is kind of a new area for quality roll. And in the Balkan countries, between Slovenia and Bulgaria, uh, everybody kept mentioning Eric Laidler. Eric Laidler.
Hmm.
They felt that he had the effect of giving so many good birds to people in that area of the world and coaching them that they said he's responsible for why we've got such quality birds, and they did have quality birds in that region of the world. And so between there's good kits everywhere,
Salute
but
to Eric Layler. He's real good.
Yeah, man. Salute him, man.
True. That's
Wait,
another
yeah,
a true roller man right there.
that's
yeah,
right.
and they almost all mentioned the birds came as gifts. It wasn't about making money. He just wanted to help that area of the world out. And obviously, they've listened to them because they don't have a long flying history. But
Mhm.
I saw a lot of good kits in those countries.
And that's fantastic to hear. Um,
Yeah.
I want to I want to ask a question, and I'm asking this question for Jerry.
Yeah.
Jerry, 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 I get is somewhat afraid to do the judging because he's afraid he's not going to do it right. What would you recommend if a guy wants to judge how they get started and how they build their confidence to do so?
I'd go, and I did it. When Monty and I, all through the 90s, we used to take trips somewhere in the States, somewhere new. We'd go to Utah, or we'd go to Northern California or Southern California or Montana. And we'd take these trips and we'd watch qualifying flies. And what I would do is pretend I was a judge, stand behind good judges or famous judges that are confident, the guys that get asked to judge, and I'd score along. Just pretend I was a judge and see what I would be giving them. And maybe you want to stand away from the judge for doing this, where you can't hear him calling out scores. But I would score whenever I was at a competition and stay away from the judge and score myself. And then later, I would see how do I compare with the judge? Because when you start getting close to what well-known established judges are seeing, it gives you confidence to know that you're in the ballpark.
And you have to do it at some point, Jerry.
Oh, you
Gotta
have
do
to
it.
start.
No. See, my plan, and you're right, man. I just don't want to, um, you know, make the wrong decisions on. I feel there's certain ways that I like to see the bird. So my mission right now is to
Yeah,
start focusing more on what I got in the backyard, and like you
Mhm.
said, going to these flies and starting to score it by myself, writing them down, and to where I
yeah,
could start comparing myself. You know what I mean? And that's one reason that I feel that it's very important for judges now to tell the score out, or explain, because that's what I want. I want more help on
yeah,
getting my confidence going. You know what I'm saying?
yeah.
But
And I think the best thing, even if you're not scoring yourself, is stand near every judge and scribe that you can,
Mhm.
and unless they have a problem with that, and just observe the guys that get asked to judge,
Mhm.
and you'll get a feel for seeing what they're seeing,
yeah, no, and
and like
definitely,
everyone's
And,
different.
and nobody's perfect,
yeah,
Jerry.
Nobody's
yeah.
perfect.
Nobody's going to be perfect,
It's
but
all an opinion.
it's all an opinion. But
Yeah,
practice
Yeah,
can get you close.
yeah.
yeah,
I'm ahead.
Right.
I'm gonna be there and watch. I'm gonna do it right, and as much as possible that I can get it
yeah,
on point. You know what I mean? And not only me, man. A lot of us, I'm pretty sure, feel the same way. And
Yeah.
yeah,
that's what it's all
Yeah.
about. And like I was saying, Brian, earlier, that the focus on doing these podcasts and talking about that, it just gets us on point of what someone else
yeah,
is thinking about. You know what I mean?
That's right.
And
yeah,
that's what's been helping me out a lot. Going over these podcasts.
yeah.
I got a question on why wasn't there any nines in on your on
Oh,
your I
Well,
guess.
I think probably a logical reason for that was because I know that when I judged Utah one time, and I thought it was good, really good observation. It made me crack up. I was hearing guys whispering and chatting, and I thought the Utah club had a really good club, very high average. They were all buddies. They all hung out together. They all attended each other's flies. It was a great place to judge. So when I kept asking, "What are you guys talking about?" They said, "No, no, keep doing what you're doing. You're doing great." So after they awarded me a nice plaque, and um, the Utah guys said to me, well, I said, so what were you guys talking about? And they said, well, one of the things that we found was we talked about it. We think you got number 1 to 12. I think there was 12 guys in the club. Right on. You got the top to the bottom the way we agreed with. And I said, oh, good. For a judge, that's something good to hear. Thank you. And I said, and the other? And then they said, and we decided that Canadians can't count past 9, which cracked me up. And then they said, what is that? And I said, well, here's the deal. I said, if you get 10 nines, you got 90 points. I said, if you got 10 tens, you got 200 points. So I need to be really sure before I go into double digits that I'm seeing double digits. So anything that I guess there's no reason I can think of why I missed 9s because I know I saw some 8s. But for me, knowing that all of a sudden anything over 10 is going to double the score, I need to be really sure that the 10 was 10, which probably means it was 11 or 12. And that's maybe the reason why I've never gone to 15. I don't think I've ever seen a 15 anyway of what I would call the 15 good ones. But for me to use double digits is not a common deal because I need to be real sure. There's a big difference because if you misjudge by one bird, which is everyone does all the time because it's a guess, what we saw, I know that 8s and 9s don't add up the same way that 10s, 11s, and 12s do. So I'm very careful once I go into double digits, just because I know it's going to really affect the end score.
How was your experience in South Africa judging Kenny Tommy? I know you had to go up a platform or something like that to see his birds.
Yes,
Explain
that
that
was
for me.
interesting because he had a good crowd showed up, but he was so treed in, as were a bunch of the English flyers who had high buildings around them all the time on trees. But with Kenny's Tommy, with his, the guys in the yard only saw 3 or 4 breaks, but he had built a tower where me and the scribe could go up and see everything. So the guys down on the ground had no clue whether the birds were doing good, bad, or whatever, which was kind of unique because only me and the scribe were up in the top of the tower where we could see all the breaks that the other guys were missing because of trees and houses.
Okay, yeah, I know that like in England they call it terra firm, that you can't, you gotta judge from the ground, or right close to the
Yeah,
kid or whatever.
and I've climbed on roofs more than once in my judging, just to be able to watch the birds. And one of the things that was worth debating or talking about was when I was in England and the kit kept flying away. You mentioned the name earlier. The one that kept going away.
Sean Overfield.
Oh yes, Sean. with guys were asking, can he take a break? They asked me later. They didn't ask when I was judging. They said if the birds did just choose to fly off in a certain direction, could a guy ask for a 5-minute break?
Like a timeout.
A timeout. And I said, as I understand it, and I'm not claiming to know everything, I said, as I understand it, it's supposed to be for an act of nature, like a predator attack or a blowaway. I said, I don't think it applies when they choose to fly over there because
well in England the judge could call them off when he doesn't see them. So if they go behind a building or behind a tree, he'll call them off. They'll click the other timer and then
stop it. Because one of the things that I did witness was one of the guys had two mated pair of peregrines attack at the same time, and they were working one high, one low. And later I said, you can take 5. And the guy didn't know it. And he said, okay, good, thanks. I'll take 5 till the attack ended. And then they attacked again. But later the joke was he looked at me and he said, if there's 2 birds attacking, can I take 5 for each of them? And I laughed. And I said, good thought. I don't think so.
At times, like, when you take 5 for a BOP attack, and right now, you could go back in at the 2-minute mark and you lose your 5. I think we should keep, you should be able to keep track. And if you got 3 minutes left, and you could go back if it comes back around and use up your 3 minutes. I mean, it's fair, and it helps out. It helps out more of those guys that have BOP problems. Use up those 5 minutes. Because 1 minute is a long time. So if the bird comes, snatches one up and they go back together, or it even spooks them and he takes off. Let's just say that BOP takes off and circles. And they get back together, and they're giving you a couple breaks before it comes back. Hey, put them back on. You put them back on. You know what I mean?
I like the idea of the English saying, "I can't see them right now." Time. And once they're visible again, you could say they're visible again.
I think you're entitled 5 minutes. Get your whole 5 minutes if you can. You know what I mean? But
so if you only use 2, you still got 3 left.
You got 3 left.
3 left.
So if he hits the kit, the BOP hits the kit, doesn't get nothing. And sometimes you know how they work. They'll go circle around and they'll come right back. But between that point, they could be giving you breaks, and you're calling in already. And here it comes again. Hey, put them back off. You got 3 minutes left. Boom.
That might be something that could be thought about.
Yeah, I think it's only fair for nowadays how things are going. You know what I mean? It's and that those are the things. Well, and that's good to know though that you're able to go on that tower next time. I have issues. With my 2-story home. So next time you come by, I'm gonna put an extension ladder. You're gonna climb on the roof.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Yeah, but
Brian, you talked earlier about and I hear this saying often about having the birds in your face. I hear guys say that often. What is the height you think is that?
Well,
fit?
I've got a rangefinder that I used to play with. Because it's a Bushnell 1500, but it would tell me how high the kit was, and also I sometimes could see a deep roll and then subtract the foot to know how deep it was, just for playing around. But I found that rangefinder was pretty good to learn roughly how high a kit was. And I find if they need to be at least 100, 150 to let go and be comfortable about letting go. And I think that the height that most people like their birds to fly is 200 to 300. Because you can see them well, you can accurately judge depth and quality, and the further they get, the harder it gets to award high quality and depth scores. So when they're flying closer, unless they're too low, which often happen in England, because some guys have low flying families. And then when the low flying family is near an area that has high houses or towers or trees, guys kind of screwed half the time.
Yeah, tell me
So
about it.
yeah, it does assist people to know where the judge should stand, which
Yeah.
Brian McCormick had figured out, because he had me, and he always does this evidently, had me stand across the highway in an area, so I was ending up looking at his birds horizontally because I was above them.
Right.
And so knowing where to put the judge is a skill.
No, like I've heard that Brian has the judges go down to, I don't know how far is it, but compare that distance to the distance that we were talking about Sean Overfield. Now, if you have to go to a certain spot and not be right there where the kid is flying, was it a problem for you to judge those birds? I mean, how far was it compared to Sean Overfield's to the point? Because you did
No,
give
it was
him
I
a
was nowhere
1.7.
to,
You give him a
no, I
1.7
wasn't I
quality.
wasn't anywhere too far, but the the view that I had assisted, because I wasn't looking over, with the guys that were standing where he was were sometimes screened by trees, but because I was far away, I could judge them and use the dark trees in the background as making the birds stand out. It was just picking a really good place where the judge should stand, because sometimes it was down the road. I always went wherever people asked me to judge, and we did their best we could. And sometimes we chased after them. But if a certain wind usually takes your birds in a certain direction, you can add a lot of extra breaks if the judge is standing where you think he should be.
Now, on those breaks, were they all clear breaks? I mean,
Were they which?
were there clear breaks to where you saw them and they didn't go behind trees,
No,
or
Brian McCormick's were all easily visible from where I was
easily
standing.
visible? Did he lose
Yeah.
any to trees?
No.
No.
And the same with Hannes Russo's. I was in a place where I could see everything. Yeah, there's some luck involved for sure, both with weather, predators, attacks, winds. Very few guys get the weather they wanted. One of the interesting points I'd make is myself and most flyers like about a 10, 15 mile an hour wind. So when the birds turn into the wind, it often sets up breaks. But interestingly, with Hannes Rousseau, he preferred dead still.
Yeah.
And it was dead still when he flew.
Yeah,
so he got exactly what he wanted.
I kept on hearing you say that, oh, there was no wind, so there was an issue. There was no wind. So I was like, you know what? Like I seen my birds active here, and I hardly ever get wind. You know what I mean? So I don't, I was gonna ask you that, what you mean by that. You know what I mean?
I always liked a little wind, because I found if you've got them flying a figure eight style with a slow wing beat, which is what everybody desires, you don't want them powering in circles. If you've got them flying in a nice relaxed wing beat and a figure eight style of flight, usually every time they turn into the wind, they'll break.
Right.
Yeah.
So it does assist things.
Yeah.
Brian, did you see any commonality in feeding? The type of being used?
Yes. The guys who did the best on average were guys that were very particular about how they prepped their birds. They were guys who didn't leave much to chance. They knew they had a routine, and they practiced, and this is something I'd advise everyone to do. is every couple of weeks, pretend it's a contest. See whether a 3-day or a 2-day or a 4-day lockup works best. Try different feed combinations. Experiment, because all the top guys had a kind of a set pattern of things that they had learned worked for their birds at their location. And every location's different and every family of birds is different. But guys who tended to just say, no, I fly them the same all the time, they didn't tend to have standout kits. The top guys usually had a very planned out feeding rep thing.
And going back to like the judging, Dave Henderson gave a good comment. He says that a local club should panel judge the flies and discuss the scores amongst each other while bringing in a out of the area judge. Good idea.
Yeah.
Shout out to you, man.
Yeah.
Man, there's a pretty good discussion we had here.
It was fun.
No doubt about it. I mean, there are two things that Brian said that's just stuck in my head. The work rate of the birds. On honest birds. In the last quarter, higher than than when they started, and 19 break in the first quarter is a lot.
Yeah.
And that he feed that 6 o'clock in the evening. I've never heard that before. He's no matter what. That's his set routine. No matter when he's going to fly the birds, he feeds at 6 o'clock in the evening.
Yeah.
Nice. What was your
just if you don't want them sitting on the roof, you can put in a little trapping mixture.
Yeah,
that doesn't count just to get them in.
Yeah.
But it was interesting that he kind of used the analogy like an Olympic athlete or a professional athlete. Most of them, when they know when game time is, they like to have a certain way that they eat before the game. And the same amount of hours for digestion and everything else. I thought it's worth playing with because he definitely knew. And he even remarked to me, he said, that's the third time in a row. The last 3 times he had prepped them for a contest, pretend contest, that they had broke 19 times in the first 5 minutes.
Oh, really?
So yeah, he definitely knew what he was hoping for, and he was keeping good records because one of the things that almost every top flyer has that separates them from the rest is they're the guys that when everyone else is chatting, they're staring up. They're the guys that really watch every little thing.
Nice.
So that you do notice.
What are your thoughts on Jeff DeWitt's birds that you judged in Kentucky?
Oh, they were fine. They looked on. They were high
I've
quality.
gone to see his birds, man. I think if he works with them a little bit more, I think he's capable of winning, man. And look at he's fourth in the world, man. And I give props to Jeff too, man. American Flyer. Yeah, as a matter of fact, give props to all you guys that landed on the top 10, man. Salute to you guys. I'll be there one day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the same thing that needs to be said is every top quality guy in the world has days that was a big thing that I learned in doing all the interviews. Sometimes the birds just disappoint you. You didn't do anything wrong. It's not the kind of hobby that can ever be mastered. The good guys tend to work harder than the guys who don't work as hard. They tend to spend more time staring at their birds and making records and writing and noticing things like air pressure and wind and temperature and what to do. But sometimes the birds just disappoint them. And then sometimes they surprise them by, like, I wasn't expecting my birds to do this well, because this is a hobby that can't be mastered.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, no,
it's
no,
impossible.
the videos you did were excellent and you know, real good. You know, whoever told
Well,
you how to put face the cameras, he's you know,
yeah,
he did a good job.
I appreciated that. And Tony, it
Yeah,
was
Tony.
Tony's idea. And I
Yeah,
said, what do you want me to ask? And he said, ask whatever you want. And I thought, what I want to get out there was who in this hobby has been a big help in your club.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think those are the guys that need the shutouts in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Who are the helpers? Who are the guys that you know really try and help people out? Where it's
shout
not
out.
just about money or being ultra competitive. It's about the guys that help everyone. Because those are the guys that I wanted to get their names out there.
Yeah,
You know, because those fanciers are the guys that make the world go around. The guys that view it as, like Monty's expression was, he said, everything you do, you should do for the hobby. It should be to help the hobby out.
yeah,
And so every regional director that put me up, wined and dined me, drove me where I needed to get, made sure I got to the airport and everything. This hobby couldn't work with all those
yeah.
guys.
Shout out to
And
the
so
regional directors out there.
every
Salute.
regional director that drove me around or picked me up or got me at the airport, I can't thank you guys enough for the great experience that I had, because those are the guys who make this hobby go round.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's my heart's out to them, and I
Yeah,
thank them.
yeah. You know what? It's a good thing now with social media and we're able to um you know, record these and share these videos with everybody and you know, I just hope that judges out there do more of this. And
Yep.
to be honest with you, that I'm learning so much, how we talked about, you know, just being a little scared or whatever to judge. And by seeing these videos, like how you were taking them, how Danny Galarza has done them, you know, the way you filmed it was more accurate. I enjoyed watching those videos, and I just hope that on the big flies, like we having the nationals coming up, and Trent Hurst, I believe, is the one that's gonna judge. I hope that he does the same thing, you know what I mean,
Yep.
and make it a trend, you know.
Yeah, we can all build on this hobby of making it better and better the more we do it. And I know I'm going to jump at the opportunity for any places that, if I get the chance to go back and judge a regional or a qualifying fly, I'll be there, because there's nothing I enjoy more now that I can't fly my own birds, and it's just being involved in a hobby and
Yeah.
trying to do what I can to help anything out.
Yeah. Gabe Glenn says, "What about DQ birds having to fly at 15 minutes? Do you think that is a necessary part of competition?" We already went over that, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, the 15 minutes. So you'll have to go back and and pay attention. Get up, pay attention,
Yeah.
Glenn. Gabe, what the heck?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, but
No,
hey,
lots of good ideas too. And but the big thing that I would like to say is anyone that wants to get better in this hobby has to get off their butt and leave their backyard.
Mm-hmm.
You have to go travel and support flies. You have to see other areas. You have to see other flyers that are known to be good to know what's possible.
Mm-hmm.
The more that you travel to watch or support flies or support club flies, the better you'll get. Because there's these backyard people that think they've got great birds, and some of them make lots of money selling their birds, and yet they will never show what their birds could do for an audience.
Mm-hmm.
And I just, that's not where it's at. the good guys want everyone to come over and watch their birds, whether they're good, whether they're not good. The more you travel to watch other people's birds, the more that you attend flies, the more you'll learn.
Realize that that's a common theme that we talk about in almost every podcast, because it is important. It matters.
It does.
Yeah, there's no doubt it matters. What you see when you go out there, is an education. You get an education.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and one thing I think too is very important too, like you know, when you have a judge like you, Brian, that's traveling and going all over the place, man, you know what? As a region, as a club, wine and dine the dude, man. Like take care of him, man. I don't know, man. Even give him,
Everyone did.
you know, and that's that, man. You got to, you know what I mean, and make them feel right, and anything they need,
Yeah.
you know. Hey, you're okay with clothing, food,
Yeah.
money, whatever, you know what I mean. It's
Well,
within
sometimes the biggest favor that guys could do was to get me to a motel or a hotel room by dinner time.
yeah,
Just when you're on the road and you're sleeping in a different bed every night and everything's different, sometimes the best thing that you just look forward to is a quiet evening where you can stretch out on a bed, watch some TV, eat a meal, and go to bed early.
yeah.
Because sometimes it wears on you.
I heard
Yeah.
I heard you even got a little fishing trip in one of those.
Oh yeah. Steve Butler in California took me out bass fishing. I mean, there were so many little side trips that that made it just like a memorable experience. Was sometimes just having days off and seeing the sights in all the different parts of the world.
Yeah, I
And
wish you had a second day here. I wanted to take you up north to Sedona or something, man. But it was
yeah,
just back to back, get off a plane, get back on a plane,
yeah.
and you know, I
Well,
read
if there's
you.
ever a local club fly, I would love to visit the areas that I visited more often, or often. It's just the World Cup. It's a chore. It's a lot of work. It's something everybody should have the chance to do if they want once. But to make those friends around the world and know that perhaps in the future you can come and judge a club fly or a regional if the guys liked what you did. That's how I hope to spend the rest of my retirement, is just going and doing local areas if the guys want a judge from a different region.
Yeah.
And I've even said if it's a far one, like South Africa or Australia or whatever, I'll pay for the flight.
Yeah.
Just to be able to enjoy it. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be cool. I'd like that'd be nice. You know, what I mean, I'll take you around and
Yeah.
sightseeing and stuff. You know, what I mean, take you to the ghetto, take you to the ghettos out here. Nah, I'm just saying. Take the bus somewhere. You know.
Oh, there's a million fun things to do anywhere in the world.
Yeah, but all right. I mean, you got anything else you wanna in the topics? Ray, that you wanna?
No, but if ever in the future you have questions or ideas, I'd be glad to help out and do another one of these. I hope I made sense.
Yeah,
but it was fun.
Did, Brian. And I just want to thank him for taking the time to come on, man.
Yeah.
We really appreciate everything you did for the World Cup. It was exciting to see you on videos over and over again. Like, oh, there's Brian again, you know?
Yeah. Well, thanks, guys.
I don't think, guys, a lot of people realize in our hobby how excited it is to see somebody talking about the things that we care about, you know, that we like, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, in the middle of the day, I'm in my little postal truck, you know, and I got my video going, you know.
Watching me too. I'm like the same way at work, you know.
Yeah, you know, I mean.
Well, that was all Tony Hatum's idea, and more than anyone else, to devote the time and effort that he did to make this hobby what it is. First time taking on a job like that. we all owe him a big thank you.
Yeah.
props to
Thanks,
you.
Tony.
Yeah, what I'm gonna do is
Good.
I'm gonna try to download all the videos and just I'm not gonna edit it, but just I'm gonna put it all in one so that we won't lose them. You know, have to go
Good,
scrolling. I'm gonna put them all in
good
one,
idea.
and hopefully we could put it up there so one place like we could put it on the videos, you know, where you press the
Yeah,
videos or whatever. Easier because I was going through them. I had to scroll down, and but you know
Yeah.
we'll get there. You know, what I mean,
good.
any last words that you want to give everybody out there, man? What special
The last thing
thanks or
I'll
whatever.
close with, I thank everyone involved in making this possible for me. And everybody treated me like a king. And it literally is something to my dying day. I will be glad that I was able to do it. And I appreciate everyone's efforts so much.
Yeah, right.
Nice,
We
nice.
salute you, Brian. We salute
Hey,
you.
Brian, salute.
thanks, guys.
Yeah, and then one last thing, I want to thank everybody. You know, we had a good audience today. I'm trying to get two guys, and I need your guys' help. You know, I'd like to get Tiny Biker on here and Edgar Roscoe from South Africa, and if you guys could help out and you know, help us get some good guests on here, special guests, and that'll be nice. You know, um, I got a contact with Herb Sparks, and we might have him next. So it'll
Yep.
be a good thing. And thanks for supporting the podcast. Those of you that are supporting the Patreon, I thank you guys so much. I hope you guys enjoyed the John Wallace video I put up there. It's pretty cool. A little tour of his loft, and appreciate the support. And just want to say thank you to everybody. Salute.